Welcome. Grab your coffee, settle in, and let this story touch your heart.
He walked through the grand revolving doors of Langston Corporate Tower with quiet steps and a wrinkled suit. It didn't fit him well, the jacket was slightly too long, and the pants sagged slightly at the ankles. His shoes, though polished, were obviously worn down. He clutched a faded leather folder under his arm, worn at the edges and clamped shut like it held something precious. The lobby buzzed with executives, assistants, and interns scurrying like bees. A massive chandelier dripped light from the ceiling. The air smelled of expensive cologne, coffee, and anxiety. But amid the chaos, one person stood still, a tall, uniformed security guard leaning against the reception desk with a cup of coffee in one hand and a judgmental smirk on his face. From the moment the man in the wrinkled suit stepped in, the guard's eyes locked onto him like a hawk spotting a field mouse. "Sir," the guard called, loud enough to silence the hum of nearby conversations. "This building doesn't accept walk-ins. Deliveries go around the back." The man paused, his tired eyes meeting the guard's with a calm that didn't match the tension now building around them. "I'm not making a delivery," he replied gently. "I have a 10 o'clock appointment." The guard scoffed and chuckled, taking a slow sip from his coffee. "With who?" "The janitor." A couple of nearby workers stifled awkward laughs, pretending to look away. One woman gave the man an apologetic glance but didn't speak. "I'm here to see Mr. Harris on the 42nd floor, the man said. "It's regarding the Langston Community Grant Initiative." Now the smirk turned into a grin. "You mean Langston Foundation? You dressed like that to talk about millions in funding? Man, they'll throw you out before the elevator even dings." "I'll take that chance," the man said calmly. "Could you notify Mr. Harris that Noah Thompson is here?" The name didn't ring any bells for the guard. He waved a dismissive hand. "Look, Noah or whatever, people in this building don't take meetings with guys who look like they walked out of a thrift shop. Why don't you go clean up first? Maybe then I'll think about calling up." That was the moment. The moment when humiliation was supposed to take hold. The moment when most people would turn around, mumble an apology, and slink back into the street where they belonged. But Noah didn't move. He didn't raise his voice, didn't plead, didn't fight. He just stood there, still and composed, like a man who had learned to carry more than just files in a folder. His silence unnerved the guard. "I'll wait here," he said simply, stepping to the side and sitting on a bench beneath the company's gold-plated logo. He placed the folder on his lap and folded his hands over it. Minutes passed. The lobby resumed its rhythm. People came and went. The guard kept glancing at him, increasingly irritated that his snide remarks hadn't driven the man out. At exactly 10:03 a.m., the elevator doors opened, and out stepped Jonathan Harris, executive director of Langston Foundation, in a tailored gray suit and crisp blue tie. He looked around with slight confusion until his eyes fell on the man sitting quietly on the bench. His face lit up. "Noah," Harris called, rushing forward with an outstretched hand. "I thought your assistant said you were running late." "I've been waiting upstairs." Noah stood, shaking his hand warmly. "I came early. Just got caught up down here." Harris turned, confused, to the front desk. "Why didn't anyone call up?" The receptionist looked toward the security guard. The guard stiffened. I thought he was not on the visitors list," the guard stammered. "Noah Thompson," Harris said pointedly, "is the primary architect of the Langston Grant Initiative and a founding member of the Urban Renewal Alliance. He's the reason we're even having this meeting." You could hear the temperature drop in the room. Harris turned back to Noah. "Let's head up, I've got the whole board waiting." The elevator doors opened. As Noah stepped in, he turned slightly to look at the guard. No anger in his expression. No arrogance. Just a quiet, tired gaze that said more than words ever could. The guard, now beet red, stood at attention instinctively. As the doors began to close, his voice broke through. "Sir," he said softly. "I'm sorry." Noah nodded once. "Take care." Back upstairs, the boardroom was filled with suits, spreadsheets, and skeptical expressions. Most of the board members hadn't met Noah yet, just heard his name in memos, proposals, and emails. When he entered, a few eyebrows rose at his clothes, but Harris quickly silenced that energy. "Gentlemen, ladies," Harris said, "this is the man who changed our entire trajectory. The data, the vision, the fieldwork, it's all his." Noah walked to the head of the table and opened his folder. Not with desperation, but with quiet confidence. What followed in the next 40 minutes wasn't just a presentation, it was a revelation. Noah spoke with the grounded knowledge of someone who had walked the streets he wanted to improve, sat in the broken classrooms he aimed to rebuild, and wept with mothers who had lost sons to failing systems. He spoke not just of numbers, but of names. Not just of profit, but of purpose. But downstairs, the guard still stood behind the desk, coffee gone cold in his hand, replaying the moment over and over again in his mind. He had mocked a man for the color of his skin, the cut of his clothes, the wear on his shoes, never once thinking the man in front of him could hold the key to changing a city. And tomorrow, he'd salute him. The elevator doors closed slowly behind Noah and Harris, sealing off the heavy silence that had descended upon the lobby. The security guard, Marcus, stood rigid at his post, but his thoughts ran wild. His fingers twitched by his belt. His chest was hot with embarrassment, but under that, there was something else. Something unfamiliar. Shame. He kept replaying Noah's face in his mind. That calm, patient expression. It wasn't smug, it wasn't bitter. It was almost worse. It was the look of a man who had seen this all before, many times, and knew exactly how it would play out. That look said, "This is normal for you. And it shouldn't be." Marcus shifted his weight. He glanced around, checking to see if anyone was still watching. No one seemed to care anymore. The moment had passed. But for him, it echoed like a drumbeat in his ears. Upstairs, conference room, floor 42. Noah closed his leather folder after 40 minutes of presenting. The room was dead silent. Not the awkward kind, but the kind that follows when something real has just happened. One board member, an older woman with silver hair and kind eyes, finally broke the silence. "Mr. Thompson, you didn't just bring us a grand initiative. You brought us a vision. I don't think we've ever seen anything like this before." Noah nodded, but his voice was quiet. "It's not a vision I created. I just listened to the people we've ignored." Another board member leaned forward. "The council's already hesitant. They don't think these neighborhoods are worth the investment." "They're not investments," Noah replied firmly. "They're communities. And if we don't act now, the divide grows. The resentment grows. People give up hope, and when hope dies, that's when the real problems start." The room nodded. Harris beamed with pride, like a man watching a younger brother rise above every expectation. After some discussion, the board voted to approve the preliminary funding. Noah was asked to return in 2 weeks for a larger presentation to the city council. As the meeting concluded, one of the members whispered to Harris, "He doesn't look like much, but he carries something powerful." Harris smiled. "He carries the truth." Meanwhile, back in the lobby, Marcus was still shaken. He'd been in security for 12 years. Seen CEOs, celebrities, even senators walk through those doors. He prided himself on reading people. Profiling, they called it at the academy. Body language. Movement. Threat assessment. But today wasn't about threat detection. Today, he'd profiled someone because of their skin color and wrinkled clothes, and got it horribly wrong. And this wasn't the first time. He could remember the kid he stopped last year, just for sitting too long near the revolving doors. Black boy. Backpick. Waiting for his sister. Marcus had radioed in a potential loiter, and sent him away before ever asking a question. Later, he found out the sister worked upstairs. He thought about the woman he followed through the store 2 weeks ago when he was off duty. She had a designer bag, but something about her made him assume it was stolen. She noticed. The way she clutched her purse tighter, her eyes flicking over her shoulder. Now he realized why. And now he saw Noah. Noah's walk down. An hour later, Noah returned to the lobby. The elevator opened, and once again he stepped out with quiet steps. His folder was tucked beneath his arm. His shoulders relaxed. Marcus stiffened, unsure whether to speak. But this time, Noah walked right up to him. I didn't catch your name earlier, Noah said. Marcus cleared his throat. It's Marcus. Noah nodded. Nice to meet you properly, Marcus. There was no bite in his voice. No condescension. Just decency. I owe you an apology, Marcus blurted, his voice rough. I was out of line earlier. I judged you for the way you looked. That's not who I want to be. Noah studied him for a moment, then said something that knocked the wind out of Marcus more than any shouting ever could. You're not the first. But you could be the last if you choose to be. That hit Marcus in the chest like a blow. People have expectations, Noah continued, about what success should look like. What leadership should look like. But if you've lived what I've lived, you know appearance is never the full story. Marcus swallowed hard. You're right. I got used to things being a certain way. But that doesn't make it right. Noah offered a small smile. Growth starts where comfort ends. Marcus stared at him, ashamed, but grateful. Then he did something he hadn't done in over a decade on this job. He stood tall, straightened his spine, and gave Noah a full salute. Not mockingly. Not for show. A gesture of respect. Noah blinked in surprise, but returned the nod with quiet dignity. Later that night, Marcus's apartment. Marcus sat on his couch, still in uniform, staring at the TV. But he wasn't watching it. The screen flickered images of a political debate, people yelling about crime, taxes, borders, but none of it touched him like the quiet presence of one man in wrinkled clothes had earlier that day. He looked down at his notepad. He had started writing something after his shift, unsure why. Just names. Memories. A list of moments where he was part of the problem. He didn't know what he would do with the list yet, but writing it was a start. Meanwhile, in a quiet apartment across town, Noah sat at his kitchen table, his worn leather folder open, papers scattered across the wood. He was reviewing the next phase, budget proposals, contact sheets, council names. But his mind wandered. He thought of Marcus. He thought of how many times he'd been in that exact moment, stopped, questioned, doubted, not because of his knowledge or experience, but because of his skin, his clothes, his look. But something about today felt different. Marcus's apology had been sincere. And his salute, that was real. Perhaps change didn't always come with marches or microphones. Maybe sometimes it started in quiet gestures, in the space between confrontation and compassion. He looked up at a faded photo of his father on the wall. A civil rights organizer, long gone now. The photo showed him on the steps of a courthouse, holding a picket sign with his son, Noah, barely old enough to stand. Still walking your path, Dad? Noah whispered. And he returned to work. Back at Langston Tower, 2 days later. A new visitor arrived at the building. A young black man. Nervous. Dressed in a simple hoodie and jeans. He walked in, clutching a folder that looked familiar. Marcus, standing at the front desk, glanced up. For a moment his old reflexes kicked in. Then he stopped, took a breath, and walked around the desk toward the young man. Can I help you? He asked, not with suspicion, but with genuine interest. I have a meeting, the boy stammered. With Mr. Harris. It's about the Youth Design Fellowship. Marcus smiled and nodded. You're in the right place. I'll call up and let him know you're here. The boy blinked. Surprised. Thanks, he said. Marcus didn't miss the way the young man's shoulders relaxed. As the elevator doors opened, Marcus looked at him and said, You do good in there. The boy smiled. I'll try. The doors closed, and Marcus returned to his desk, but not the same man as before. The days passed with an unusual quietness at Langston Tower. The building remained just as polished, just as proud, but something beneath its glossy surface had shifted. Marcus felt it first. He noticed it in the silence between greetings, in the way people looked at him and the way he looked back. He no longer scanned for threats the same way. He scanned for assumptions, his own. He thought about Noah more than he expected to. Not out of guilt, not anymore. Out of curiosity, respect. There was something in Noah's composure that haunted him, not the silence, but the control. Marcus had served in the Marines. He'd seen men break under pressure. But Noah hadn't even flinched under judgment. He had looked straight through it, like he'd been through it 100 times before. And that, Marcus realized, was the saddest part. At exactly 8:10 that Tuesday morning, the lobby doors slid open again. Noah stepped in, the same familiar figure with the worn leather folder tucked under his arm. This time, there was no hesitation. Marcus straightened up, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. "Back so soon?" he asked, trying to sound casual. Noah smiled as he walked over. "Prep work. Got a bigger pitch next week. Thought I'd get ahead." Marcus hesitated, then leaned forward just slightly. "Can I ask, that folder, what's in it?" Noah glanced down at it, then back up. "This? It belonged to my father. He was a civil rights organizer. Said it reminded him that even in a digital world, change still starts with something physical. Paper. Real voices." Marcus nodded slowly. "So this isn't just about grants and numbers to you, is it?" Noah's face grew more serious. "This is about legacy. Dignity. My dad marched so I wouldn't be turned away at buildings like this. But here I am, still proving I belong." Marcus looked down, shame flooding back into his chest. "You were calm that day. I don't know how you didn't lose it on me." Noah shrugged gently. "Losing it would have made it about me. I'm trying to build something bigger than that. Rage burns fast, but grace stays." Marcus exhaled, slow and heavy. "I've spent years thinking I was just doing my job, that I was keeping people safe. But what if I've been standing in the way this whole time?" Noah's voice softened. "Then maybe now is when you step aside. Or better yet, help others through." That line struck Marcus harder than any reprimand ever could. As the elevator dinged and Noah walked toward it, Marcus wasn't the same man who had stopped him a week ago. He was still in uniform, still at his post, but inside, something was unrecognizable. Something was changing. Upstairs, the conversations were growing bolder. Jonathan Harris had been watching Noah's every move. Not just during meetings, but in how he carried himself. When the time came, he asked Noah the question he had been holding in since the incident. "How did you stay composed when Marcus acted like that?" Noah glanced at the window. "I've had worse. A lot worse. I just pick my battles. You picked grace. I picked strategy. Anger closes ears. But sometimes, grace can crack the hardest walls." Harris leaned forward. "Then maybe it's time you tell that story publicly. Not just the proposal. The whole thing. From the lobby to the letter. They need to hear it." Noah didn't respond at first. Then he nodded. "If I speak the truth. Not for applause. For change." That same evening, Marcus sat at home, his laptop open for the first time in months. He searched terms he had never bothered with before: racial profiling, security bias, unconscious discrimination. Each article felt like a mirror held too close. It wasn't easy reading, but it was necessary. He scribbled thoughts in a notepad, moments he remembered where he had assumed, judged, dismissed. A list too long. A burden long overdue. 3 days later, when Noah returned, this time with a young woman in a modest hijab at his side, Marcus didn't hesitate. He greeted them both with a clarity that surprised even himself. "You're pre-registered. Here are your passes. And Mr. Thompson, this is for you." He handed Noah a white envelope, sealed, his handwriting stiff but careful across the front. "What's this?" Noah asked, raising an eyebrow. "Something I've been working on." Noah tucked it into his folder without opening it. "Thank you." As he and the young woman walked away, Marcus noticed her pause just before entering the elevator. "It's rare," she said quietly. "Being welcomed like that." "Thank you." Marcus nodded, humbled. "It should never be rare. I'll make sure it's not." When Noah returned home that night, he finally opened the envelope. Inside was a single typed letter. "Mr. Thompson, you may not remember every face you've impacted, but I'll remember yours. I've worn this uniform most of my life. Thought I was doing the job right, protecting buildings, screening for threats. But I wasn't looking for threats, I was reinforcing walls. Your presence that day exposed something I didn't want to see. My own blindness. Your silence, your patience, your grace, they broke through. You didn't just walk through that lobby. You walked through my armor. And that saved something in me. I don't deserve a seat at your table. But I'll stand at the door and make sure no one else like you gets turned away. Thank you, Marcus. Noah folded the letter carefully and slid it behind the final page of his presentation packet. The most powerful changes never came with noise. They came with letters like that. With moments no one saw, except those who needed to. A week later, the city council event arrived. The chamber was packed with officials, cameras, executives, and press. Noah stood at the edge of the podium, folder in hand, heart steady. After a brief introduction from Harris, Noah stepped into the spotlight. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't gesture grandly. He just spoke. I came here to talk about funding, about buildings. But what I really want to talk about is doors. He paused. A few days ago, I walked into this very building. I was stopped, not by a system, but by a man. A man doing what he thought was right. Because that's what he'd always known. The room shifted. Murmurs. I wasn't angry. I was exhausted. Because for so many of us, getting through a door is still the hardest part. He looked around. But that meant that he changed. He faced himself. And then he held the door open. Silence stretched across the room. If one person can do that, what's stopping the rest of us? Across the city, Marcus watched from a small breakroom screen. When he heard his name mentioned, when he saw Noah speak of him not with bitterness but with honesty, he didn't feel exposed. He felt honored. And for the first time in years, Marcus didn't feel like just a man in uniform. He felt like a man rebuilding what that uniform once stood for. The days that followed the city council event brought with them a strange, swelling ripple. Noah hadn't expected applause. He hadn't even expected agreement. But something about the way he'd spoken, with restraint, with honesty, with just enough fire to light reflection, had cracked the walls of indifference. Clips from the speech began circulating online. A low-res recording uploaded by a local journalist showed him standing behind the podium, his voice steady and calm as he told the story of the man at the door. It wasn't a viral sensation, but it was persistent. It found its way into classrooms, local forums, office break rooms. People didn't just hear it. They saw themselves in it. Some as Noah, others, more uncomfortably, as Marcus. At Langston Tower, things began to shift in the subtlest of ways. People didn't just walk through the lobby anymore. They noticed it. Some nodded to Marcus as they passed. A few even stopped to speak with him. But one morning, as the sky broke into soft morning light and the first coffee cups passed through the revolving doors, something unexpected happened. A tall man in a navy suit paused at the security desk. His badge gleamed, Regional Director, Langston Holdings. He looked directly at Marcus. You're the guard from the story, aren't you? Marcus tensed slightly. He nodded. I was, he said cautiously. The man's face didn't harden. It softened. My daughter showed me that video last night, he said. Made me think about how many people I've ignored, avoided, judged without ever speaking a word. That story, it's not just about you. Marcus didn't know what to say. But the man extended his hand. Thank you for being honest about it. And just like that, the man turned and disappeared into the elevator. Marcus stood still for several seconds after, wondering how many silent apologies and unseen acknowledgments that video had awakened. Maybe change didn't always need riots or resignations. Maybe it needed moments, quiet ones, shared between strangers who chose to see more. Upstairs, Noah's world was expanding fast. His proposal for community development grants wasn't just approved, it was celebrated. Meetings that used to take place in tight rooms with wary eyes were now happening in wide-open spaces, with voices eager to collaborate. People who had never invited him into their circles were suddenly requesting his input. It would have been easy to enjoy the attention, to smile politely, take the praise, and move forward. But Noah had other plans. One afternoon, Harris found him pacing the rooftop terrace, looking out over the city as the sun hung low behind a patch of golden clouds. You look like a man burdened by good news, Harris said with a smirk. Noah didn't smile. Everyone keeps saying this is a win, he said. But what if it's not? Harris raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? I stood on a stage and told the truth, Noah said. But now I'm the safe version of that truth. The inspiring version. They're not uncomfortable anymore. And maybe they should be. Harris folded his arms. So what do you want to do? Noah turned to him. I want to build something permanent. A space. A center. 4 real stories. Not cleaned up versions. Stories from people who didn't get a second chance. Who weren't given grace. You want to build it here? In this building, Noah said firmly. In Langston Tower. The same place I was stopped. I want the place that once stood as a gate to become a beacon. There was a long silence. Then Harris spoke. Make the plan. I'll back it. Downstairs, Marcus was making his own quiet changes. He no longer simply checked names and IDs. He checked assumptions. When a teenager with tattered sneakers walked in for a courier delivery, Marcus didn't ask him to wait outside like he used to. He smiled and asked his name. When a young woman with a hoodie and a guarded posture arrived to interview for an internship, Marcus didn't study her with suspicion. He offered her a bottle of water. These were small acts, but each one felt like a brick removed from a wall that had taken a lifetime to build. One evening after his shift ended, Marcus took the long way home. He found himself walking into a community center 2 blocks from his apartment, a place he'd passed 100 times but never entered. Inside, kids played chess on folding tables. A woman led a reading circle. A bulletin board hung heavy with flyers about job fairs, voter registration drives, mentorship programs. He walked slowly, quietly. An older man behind a counter greeted him. Looking for someone? Marcus hesitated, then shook his head. No. Just looking. The man nodded knowingly. Good place to start. For the first time in years, Marcus signed up for a volunteer shift. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. He realized the same thing Noah had once said to him. Doors don't just open for others. Sometimes they open for you too. Word spread about Noah's new plan, the Threshold Project. A permanent space on the mezzanine level of Langston Tower. Open to the public. Built to amplify underrepresented voices, facilitate difficult conversations, and archive stories of bias, redemption, resilience. Construction began swiftly. Donations poured in from unlikely places, corporate sponsors, grassroots organizations, even private individuals who had seen the video and felt moved. Noah oversaw every inch of it. He insisted the flooring be made from reclaimed wood, symbolizing broken pasts repurposed. He requested glass walls, not to separate, but to reflect, so that every visitor had to see themselves. When it finally opened, the first guest speaker was a formerly incarcerated father who told the story of being misjudged at every turn. The second was a teenage girl who had been suspended from school for wearing her natural hair. And the third was Marcus. He almost said no. But Noah insisted. You're the first person who walked through the fire, he said. Your story matters. Marcus stood before the small crowd, nervous at first. Then steady. I'm not a hero, he began. I'm not even the good guy in this story. I was the man at the door. I stopped people like Noah, thinking I was doing the right thing. I let my fear dress itself up as policy. And I didn't even notice the damage until someone saw me clearly and didn't flinch. He looked at Noah, sitting silently in the front row. I owe him more than an apology. I owe him my change. When he stepped down, the room was quiet for a long second. Then came applause, not loud but honest. And when he returned to his seat, Noah stood and saluted him. It wasn't for the uniform. It was for the man he chose to become. By now, the building that once represented separation had become a lighthouse. People walked into Langston Tower with less fear. Not because the world had changed overnight, but because someone inside had dared to change first. And maybe that was the lesson. That transformation doesn't begin with laws or speeches or programs. It begins when one man looks at another, not through him, not past him, but truly at him, and decides to open the door. It was the anniversary of the Threshold Project's opening, and the air in Langston Tower buzzed with a quiet electricity. A year ago, the mezzanine floor had been just another overlooked space, concrete, sterile, passed over without a second glance. Now, It was filled with art, recordings, photographs, and stories that whispered truths most had tried to forget. Stories of dignity denied and reclaimed. Of strangers turned allies. Of doors, both literal and metaphorical, finally opened. Marcus stood outside the building before his shift started, sipping a lukewarm cup of coffee. He watched the morning crowd stream in. People of every shade and style, interns with laptops, maintenance workers, executives, school groups. No one was invisible anymore. At least not here. Not on his watch. He still wore the same uniform, but something had shifted in the way he carried it. The badge no longer meant authority alone. It meant accountability. The posture he kept wasn't rigid with pride but rooted in purpose. He wasn't guarding a building anymore. He was welcoming a world. Inside, Noah adjusted the microphone clipped to his blazer as final preparations for the commemorative event wrapped up. The stage was modest. A circle of chairs, a soft backdrop of testimonials projected behind them. Tonight's program wasn't about speeches. It was a conversation. An honest one. He scanned the crowd gathering. Familiar faces nodded his way. Harris, a few council members, former speakers, young interns who now mentored others. But one face grounded him more than the rest. Marcus, quietly slipping into the back row. Noah took a deep breath. When he stepped into the circle and the lights dimmed, the hush was immediate. "Thank you for being here," he began. 1 year ago, this space didn't exist. 1 year ago, a moment at that lobby door reminded me that change doesn't start in buildings, it starts in people. He glanced at Marcus. And when people change, buildings follow. He went on to share updates, expanded programs, outreach success, new scholarships. But the heart of his message was simpler. Change, real change, is quiet and stubborn. It doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it just stands its ground long enough to matter. As the evening moved into the panel discussion, someone from the audience raised a hand. A young woman, barely out of high school, eyes burning with both hope and uncertainty. "How did you forgive him?" she asked. "The guard. After what he did." The room grew still. Noah didn't rush his answer. "Because I saw myself in him," he said. "Not in his actions, but in his ignorance. I remembered times when I made assumptions too. When I judged too quickly. We all carry biases. It's what we do with them that defines us." He didn't just say sorry. He changed. And that's rarer than you think. The girl nodded slowly, the answer landing deeper than words. After the event ended, people lingered, hugging, reflecting, exploring the exhibits one last time. Marcus stayed until most had left. He approached Noah at the edge of the display featuring the original letter, the one Marcus had written. "I still can't believe you kept that thing on the wall," Marcus said, almost sheepishly. Noah chuckled. "It's not about the paper. It's about the proof." "Proof of what?" "That people can surprise you, even themselves." Marcus looked down at the floor, then back up. I wanted to show you something." From his coat pocket, he pulled out a simple card. On the front was the Langston Tower logo. On the inside, a formal acceptance letter. Security Officer Marcus Gaines, selected to lead diversity and inclusion training for all new hires across their citywide locations. Noah blinked, stunned. "You're teaching the next generation?" Marcus smiled. "I figured it's time I held the door from the inside out." Noah reached out and gripped his hand tightly. "I can't think of anyone better." They stood in silence for a moment, two men from very different pasts, now walking toward a future neither could have built alone. Outside, the city lights blinked to life. Horns blared, heels clicked, and the wind tugged gently at coats and scarves. Life went on, indifferent to the soft revolutions happening inside ordinary buildings. But Langston Tower had changed. Not because of a multi-million-dollar renovation. Not because of press or praise. But because of a single moment, a pause at a door, when judgment met grace and pride gave way to understanding. The next morning, a young man in an oversized hoodie approached the security desk. He shifted nervously, eyes darting toward the polished floors and shining elevators. Marcus greeted him with a warm smile. "Good morning. First time here?" The boy nodded. Interview upstairs, he mumbled. I wasn't sure if... Marcus held up a visitor badge. You're in the right place. And don't worry. We've been expecting you. As the boy stepped forward, he noticed a framed quote on the wall behind the desk, Noah's words etched in glass. The man at the door can either turn you away or walk beside you. We choose who we become. The boy read it once, twice, then followed Marcus toward the elevator. And in that moment, the world turned just a little more open, a little more human, and a little more whole.